What is going on, y'all? It is the Caveman. I'm here with Austin Football with Oz, as I typically am joined with. But this is a very special episode of Against the Blitz. This is the 11th, maybe 12th, 13th episode. We'll know after the fact. But we are super excited to kick off a series that we are calling the Rebuild Series, where we're going to go across probably not every team, but a lot of teams, specifically the rebuilding ones, and talk about the plan for the offseason, what we project, what we would do if we were in their position. And we're going to be joined by some special guests along the way. And I'm very, very excited. We are honored to be hosting here with Anthony Reinhard. He is a Browns fan, so we're going to be sticking with Cleveland. But more importantly, he is one of the better Twitter followers on my list. He is excellent day by day. He started his own series today that I'll let him speak to, that I was even reading up about. But I'm super excited to have him on. We're both super excited to have him on, and it's going to be a great episode.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Happy to be here.
We'll plug your socials early. It'll be down in the description.
I do a lot of football analytics stuff, some data visualization type things, and around this time of year, definitely interested in salary cap type stuff. So I was posting some stuff earlier today, which is like a sort of a rectangle where players, depending on how big their cap hit is, take up more space inside the rectangle, and the entire rectangle is the entirety of cap hits for the year for a team. And I'll probably go around and do most teams at some point in the next week or so as we get toward some restructures and cap casualty type stuff. But yeah, you can give me a follow on X at Reinhard NFL. That's REINHARD NFL, and see some of the other fun stuff that I'm getting into this off season.
Yes, I'm excited, looking forward. And then that was what I was referring to, the visual series of the breakdown for every team. And talking about the Browns, he did release his Browns breakdown, so that also helped play into my opinion on the offseason. But Austin, we'll jump to you quick. So. Yeah. This is one of the most intriguing off seasons there is out of the 32 teams, and we were kind of talking about it prior. It's not very straightforward for this team at all.
No, not even with the second overall pick. It kind of depends on where they go quarterback in free agency. It depends what they do with Myles Garrett in free agency. They're going to have a lot of draft capital, though, thank God. So they're going to be able to play around a little bit. With who they reach on, who they hope can fall. It'll be really cool. I think that they can probably come away with 2 firsts this season if they can trade Myles Garrett. So it'll be interesting just to see whose first they can get and how high they can get that first.
Yeah, so we'll start right off with Myles Garrett. I mean, it's obviously the biggest talking point. I'm sure both of you guys have done your fair share of opinion making and trade predictions, for this entire topic. We covered it ourselves. So, Anthony, for Myles Garrett, what's the outlook? Is it even possible that they can trade him because of the cap space situation? It's actually kind of ass backwards with how this could work. You would think trading Garrett would help them money-wise for anybody, but it's actually the opposite.
Yeah, that's really a great point. It kind of strikes at the heart of, when you really dig into the Browns situation, what it boils down to. So the Browns, I think, just for a little background, they take a team building approach similar to what the Eagles on the good side and what the Saints on the bad side do, which is you pay players now and then you push that money into future cap years so that you can pay more players in the current year. So when you do that, you end up kind of with a few really highly leveraged core players where you owe them a lot of money in future cap years, and then whenever a player leaves a team, that's when you have to accelerate all those cap hits into the same, into the current cap year. So all the money they pushed into the future with Myles Garrett, which is like $36 million, that bill would all come due in the 2025 cap year if they were to trade him. But that's before the draft. If they trade him after June 1st, there are different rules about how those cap hits might hit. So it's easier to trade him after June 1st, but obviously that's 2 months after the draft and they can't use that capital now. And if they're, truly in rebuilding mode, they may want to have access to that draft capital sooner. So that's just, a little background on how the Browns approach things. But, to your point, the thinking here from the Browns standpoint, I'm going to guess is that, it's not really advantageous to take that $36 million dead cap hit on Myles Garrett right now. His current cap hit is only, around, I want to say 19 million. So it would be, basically striking 16 million of cap space, and they already don't have a ton of room to work. The cap did come in, an estimation of the cap came in today a little higher than expected, which buys them maybe $5 to $8 more million than I think most people were planning for, maybe the Browns themselves. But at any rate, I think that the Browns could trade Myles Garrett. I don't want to. It's not impossible. If somebody comes with an incredible offer, I think incredible in my estimation would be multiple first round picks or the equivalent of that. So like 1 first round pick, 2 seconds, something like that. That would be kind of an offer that I don't think that they could turn away from. But short of that, I think the Browns are not going to be motivated to get rid of him and put themselves into more of a prickly cap situation than they're already in.
So with that said, if you are thrown the opportunity, so when Austin and I broke down the Myles Garrett situation a couple of weeks ago, multiple first round picks were our projection at that point. If for our perspective, you do have 2 first round picks thrown to you, even if you are put in that prickly situation, I think you just got to rip the Band-Aid off. You just got to deal with the cap hit, and you take those first round picks, and like we were talking about, and like I was referring to, you jump into the rebuild as fast as you can instead of trying to mitigate the payment over the course of the next couple of years, even if it does hurt, but like to Anthony's point, at the right price. But Austin, for this to work out, I was reading that they would have to cut multiple starters on top of the fact of if they were to trade Myles. So
yeah,
if they were to cut some guys, who would be at the top of the list for Cleveland in your mind?
Cut? I don't know about cut. I do know that there are a few players that are likely making a little bit more than you would like from their current production. Kind of guys like Jack Conklin, who are, still considered good tackles these days. But I did see something very similar to like your rectangle you were talking about, where Conklin does take up a good piece of that. So working with him, obviously trying to work with Watson on that monstrous deal. People like Greg Newsome, who are getting paid a pretty handsome salary this season. Guys like that are getting paid well. Hopefully a restructure or a trade can be in place post June 1st to kind of clear some of that up. And it kind of just comes down to, like, what would you be willing to pay for the capital that you could gain? And in some sense, if you could get a early-ish to mid-first, if you're looking at like a Falcons first, I don't know if I would take that cap hit just for like the 16th overall draft pick. So I do like your point about how it's not guaranteed, but it's not impossible.
Yeah. I think, and I will, I think Conklin is a good one to bring up. I think the Browns really don't have a ton of, what you would say are traditional, cap casualties, where they have guys that have these big, unguaranteed base salaries coming up besides Conklin. But, Conklin is a guy similar to Myles Garrett that they would take a decent sized dead cap hit if he were to leave. So I think he's potentially somebody that they might work with on a pay cut, but probably not somebody who's living up to the $15 million that they're going to owe him this year. That's, that's fringe top 10 right tackle money. So it's not like totally out of the ballpark to pay him that. I wouldn't be surprised if he stayed on the team at his current cap hit, but I also wouldn't be too surprised if he were designated to be a June 1 cut, or if he was somebody that they cut outright or negotiated a pay cut with. So I think there's a lot of options on the table with Conklin. Offensive line, and we can get into this as we go on here, but offensive line I think is a fairly big concern for the Browns. They've invested a lot of money at both of their guard spots, and the last 2 years, they really haven't gotten, I think, the production they expected out of those guys. And then at the tackles, everybody's either been hurt or they've kind of been striking out at all the potential options they have. So at tackle, they're in a pretty dire situation as it is.
Yeah. I haven't really gotten too much into it, but I do remember Bitonio saying something about possible retirement as well, especially if they kind of hit this rebuilding mode, which is starting to feel like they're about to hit. Have you heard anything else about that, about Joel Bitonio, whether or not he's actually going to pull it or if he's was kind of bluffing?
Yeah. I don't have any inside information, obviously, and if I did, I wouldn't share it here. No, yeah. But I will say, I think that Bitonio was somebody who was maybe 2 years ago, like very much on a possible Hall of Fame track. And I think that's a major motivating factor when you're not with a team that's very good, especially when you're playing on the offensive line. So I think that could have been a big motivator for him, but he just has not seemed like the same player the last 2 seasons. I kind of wonder if he sees his window kind of closing up to make his legitimate Hall of Fame argument. That's not to say he couldn't make it by having another great 2 seasons or whatever, but he probably needs to log at least one more All-Pro and maybe a couple Pro Bowls to get himself in that discussion. So I think when you're a guy like that who's had a terrific career, he's what a lot of folks would call a Ring of Honor guy, somebody who's put in a lot of years with the organization and has played really well, but maybe just isn't at that Hall of Fame level. I think when you look at the struggle of maybe going through a rough year, which is what the Browns could potentially be facing here, unless they make some really big swings. I wouldn't be shocked if he's seriously mulling it over, to kind of put a cap on that, which would be, I think, tough for the Browns, as it wouldn't really, it wouldn't clear up their cap situation at all. It would kind of be a net zero gain or loss if he were to retire, but it would be one less guy that you have a leader in the locker room.
To that point, the offensive line, generally speaking, is on the downswing. Even a guy like Wyatt Teller, who's been a rock for them on the inside, he didn't play a full season. We don't know if he's going to be a cut candidate, if he's going to be restructured. That is also a fuzzy situation. It feels like almost everybody on Cleveland's offensive line, there's some caveat with them.
And I feel like this is really, I've said this to a lot of folks, and I don't think everybody really buys into this idea, but I think the effect of the Deshaun Watson trade is obviously felt most by the fact that Deshaun Watson isn't good at football. But I think a lot of people maybe give too much credit to the fact that he has this huge guaranteed contract that I don't think it has not been the main limiting factor, I think, for the Browns in the last few years. I think really what we saw last year, a major limiting factor was the fact that they were without, potentially 3 first-round draft picks that they would have otherwise had. And I think when you look at the situation that they've had at left tackle, where they don't have an answer right now, at right tackle, they've had Conklin, who has missed some time here and there. They bumped DeJuan Jones, their 4th-round pick in 2023, to left tackle for a couple games last year before he got hurt, to see if he could potentially be that guy. But he played right tackle all through college. It's pretty unusual to see guys go from playing right tackle in college and then moving to left tackle in the pros. It's kind of a hard jump. Usually you get a lot of guys who play left tackle in college and they'll play all over the place in the NFL, but you really don't get the opposite, where guys don't play left tackle in college and then end up moving there in the pros. So I think Conklin's always played right tackle. So they kind of have 2 right tackles on the roster right now, which I think is another consideration. And Jones, after a pretty promising rookie year, took a major step back. Obviously, the guy who has been the left tackle for the Browns for the better part of the last 4 years, Jed Wills, is he's not looking like he's going to be back next year. I think is going to end up, going down in the books as a bit of a disappointment. Somebody who started for them for a couple of years, but not the answer. So I think, when you think about what those first-round picks could have been, I don't think there's any question in my mind that they would have been looking to add a tackle had they had that first-round pick in one of those years at least, and that potentially could have made a bigger difference for them this past season and going forward.
Oh yeah, I mean the cap hit the situation just inside the locker room. That report came out recently that it felt like a cloud was lifted after the guy tore his Achilles. Like I read that, like some people from some highly respected people on the team were kind of making claims like that. Like the effects of this trade dug so deep, and
yeah,
I'm not going to say you could have guessed it, but you could have assumed. I feel like any rational person prior to that trade, given the timing, probably could have thought like, what are the effects of this? Is it really worth the risk?
Yeah.
Like,
I definitely hear you. I feel like I was really unhappy about the trade and have been, since it was made. But I think something that surprised me is that in the aftermath of the trade, like in the first 2 years, you really didn't hear much about how, players were not crazy about Deshaun Watson, and as upset as a lot of fans were, I don't think that the locker room let that get out a lot. Maybe that's just the Browns, being really good at managing PR or whatever. But, I think these things tend to be a bigger deal when things aren't going right on the field, and obviously they weren't. So, I think that's kind of the nexus of that. And I think when that kind of stuff comes out, it can be really hard to go back to that. So, obviously Deshaun Watson re-injured his Achilles, possibly not going to play for a good part of 2025. So it's something they may not have to worry about too much. I can't imagine that when he does come back, he's going to be the first option that they go to unless they have serious other quarterback injury issues. So, the Deshaun Watson saga can't end until his contract pretty much exhausts at the end of 2026, most likely. But I think that, effectively his era has ended.
Deshaun Watson, I did also read that if he doesn't play a snap in 2025, there's some insurance that comes with that too. So there's a lot of things that can happen with the Browns in the next, 6 or so months and 18 months even. But Austin, so Myles Garrett, let's entertain two hypotheticals here surrounding Myles Garrett, because I think Myles Garrett's future dictates what they do in the draft, at least in my
100%.
opinion. Mm-hmm. So Myles Garrett moves. He's gone. Let's say the Falcons, I think they're a very good example, and we talked about why in past episodes. They're a team that it feels like they don't necessarily need the capital as much as other teams do. They just primarily need an edge rusher. So they say, whatever, fuck it. We need the draft picks. Or we need the player. We don't need the draft pick. So they do it. And they end up with the 15th pick. And now they have the second pick. And let's say that the Titans do go with Cam Ward. I assume I know where you'll go with this, but just you take it from there.
I mean, I am not a Shador guy. I think there's potential there, but at 2, that makes me kind of feel a little sick, especially after the whole Watson thing. You want to be more sure about your quarterback, and I don't love that. So, but I do love Abdul Carter. I am a really big Abdul Carter fan. I kind of look at it like Moneyball. When Myles Garrett goes, you have to replace those pressures somehow. And I don't know if it's going to be Alex Wright. Like, I think you got to dig a little bit deeper. And I think that we got to get Abdul Carter on this team. So he would be my pretty comfortable number 2, assuming Cam Ward's gone and assuming Myles Garrett's gone. Who the quarterback is, that's a little bit trickier. I'm not a Jackson Dart believer either. I don't think we should be reaching there. So first round, that's probably going to be where your left tackle comes. This left tackle class around that time, Josh Simmons is my left tackle 1. I'm a really big fan. He's an Ohio State guy. I would love him to be there if we can determine he's fully healthy. Guys like Kelvin Banks, not quite as high on, but would be like a quality selection in the mid-first round. That's kind of where I would lean to fix their left tackle spot if we could do that.
Anthony?
Yeah, I don't hate that at all. I think it seems to me from the stuff I've seen, and I'm not a film watcher, and I'm not a huge college football guy myself. So I kind of wait until the experts have weighed in. And what I'm seeing so far is that it seems like most folks think that Hunter and Carter, Travis Hunter from Colorado, are those are kind of the top two non-QBs in this draft, and then I've seen a range of assessments so far for both Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward. So, I don't think, if you're going to go at 2 and you're not intending on trading back, which I think the Browns have in the past had a real penchant for finding what I think are high value trade backs. I could see them kind of doing that at 2 if they're not going to take a quarterback. For me, like, I think if Shedeur is someone who a lot of experts think, and more importantly, whoever the Browns scouts believe is a guy who could go in the top 16 picks, I kind of think that if you have a quarterback that you think is at that level, you have to take them as soon as you get a chance. Because I think that teams sometimes underestimate when they're going to get another opportunity to draft that guy. I feel like, every year, every few years, you get a team that keeps thinking that they have a guy who's good enough at quarterback and passes on, somebody who ends up being really good. If you think about, where some of the great quarterbacks of this era were drafted, you could get Josh Allen at 7. You could get Patrick Mahomes at 10 or 11, and Lamar Jackson at 32. I think anybody who can go in sort of the first round is somebody who could be a legitimate superstar. And I think the ceiling is so high at quarterback that you really can't miss that opportunity if it comes to you, because you may not be able to pick in that range again without trading up a ton of draft picks. So that being said, like, right now, I would say if Shedeur is someone that people are standing behind, I would be okay taking him there at 2. Otherwise, I'm really intrigued by Hunter. I think everyone should be. If he's somebody that is going to play both ways in the NFL, that really, would be fantastic, even if he were a part-time player on offense or defense. I think I kind of expect him to be a full-time defensive player and then maybe have a few gadgety type plays on offense, which is still pretty good. I would be, if the Browns ended up taking him at 2, I'd be fine with it. But I think that the Browns, notwithstanding the fact that they have 12 picks right now, which I think is a lot for them, it's a lot for any team. And they're a team that tends to not trade up; they tend to trade back. I'm kind of curious if they'll, as we get through free agency, maybe use some of those picks to acquire some veterans, or maybe do something short of trading up on draft day. Although I wouldn't preclude them from doing that. It would be out of character for them. I believe they've only, in the 5 years that they've had this regime, I want to say they've only traded up 3-4 times, which is not a lot compared to a lot of teams. So, they may try to do that to consolidate some of that draft capital. They have, I think, 6 picks between like 165 and 210. So a lot of picks packed around the 6th round there that I think they're probably hoping they can move up into the 4th round with one of those, or, put a couple of those together and get somebody who's more proven at tackle or receiver.
Yeah, I think the 2nd overall pick, I mean, in my mind, when I was breaking it down, it was really one alley for me. Like, I'm the complete opposite in terms of this quarterback class specifically. But you make a fair point, Anthony. It's like you're not guaranteed a top 3 pick every year if you're a bad team. Like, bottom feeders don't always get these opportunities, even if they're bottom feeders. Like, you can
look at the Raiders. I mean, they've been terrible for years, and they're picking 6th this year. They might be locked out of a quarterback even. So
they probably are.
It's tough. I mean, people underestimate how easy it is to be bad. I think sometimes you can be bad and still not get into those early picks where the premium quarterbacks are. But go on.
No, I was just gonna say it is just this quarterback class for me. I firmly still believe in making sure the guy is right, and I think the opportunity that they seem to have, to your point of trading back, if Cam Ward is gone at 1, I think Abdul Carter is also the slam dunk selection, and assuming Garrett's traded. But trading back is intriguing, especially if Carter goes at 1. I'm not even sure I'm taking Cam Ward at 2. I think trading back to 6 with the Raiders, let them have their pick of the litter. Like, they probably aren't even expecting to have Ward available. So if they're able to jump to 2, if the Browns aren't interested and have their choice of one of them, I think that would be interesting. And then it's the 6th pick. You could end up walking away with, the top tackle in the draft, which I think would be huge for them, considering, the state of the offensive line, like we were already talking about. So Will Campbell to the Browns would be, I think, a very ideal situation. If they stuck at 2 and they traded Garrett and got 15, that 15th pick could be a number of different guys. I feel like the different mock drafts I've seen, the middle round, the middle selections vary as far as how people feel on prospects really at this stage. But I do think targeting the trenches should be their bottom line in this class. At 2, at 15, at 201, across the board, I think that is where the foundation needs to start. And I'm not sure if the Eagles can set a better example than they did, or even I know the Chargers are, the way they went out was frowned upon, but still, like, they're looking up. They did the unpopular thing in drafting the tackle over the receivers. So I think the example has been set, in Cleveland has the opportunity to follow suit with all of this draft capital.
Yeah, and I think that kind of building through the offensive line is maybe sort of an underrated thing that folks are maybe not expecting from the Browns this offseason. I think back to like 2020, when the Browns first brought in Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski, and they kind of had the pieces in place to have a strong run game already, but invested in Jack Conklin in free agency to bring him in, and drafted Jed Wills at left tackle to kind of solidify the offensive line that they had. And they had, one of the best offensive lines in football for 2 years. Obviously had a fantastic running back in Nick Chubb, who I think is probably about done with the Browns right now. But kind of the floor that kept them competitive for the better part of those 3 or 4 years until this past year is that they had a really strong run game that they could rely on. And the Browns they hired Ken Dorsey, who was previously the offensive coordinator for the Bills. This season they brought him in to kind of, I think, make the offense a little more friendly to Deshaun Watson's skill set. With Watson kind of maybe out of the picture, I think they maybe get away from some of the stuff that Dorsey had brought with him and go back to maybe more of the run-heavy type sets that Stefanski was bringing in, and sort of threatening the run game, and then passing when possible. So I think there's a lot of pieces that they need to put together to get back to the Stefanski tight end heavy scheme that they had played with in some of those earlier years of this regime. But I think that might be, if they're going to do like a soft rebuild or even a hard rebuild, that's not a bad place to kind of think about it, where you can kind of raise the floor of your team by building a strong running game and then passing, setting things up for deep explosive passes when you can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it also speaks to like this running back class being absolutely stacked, the offensive line class being absolutely stacked. It can kind of help. It's a lot easier to fix your running back room and find a few plug-in linemen that fit your scheme, rather than trying to create a whole new scheme around a brand new quarterback that plays nothing like your prior. So having a new OC, Tommy Rees, I don't really know how he would like to call plays. Not super familiar, but I would love, kind of like what you said, kind of go back to what the Browns were doing well when they were winning at the time. Obviously, Nick Chubb, even if he comes back, probably isn't Nick Chubb that we know. But the Ohio State running backs in this class are outstanding. There's a couple other guys, Marion Hampton, Caleb Johnson, Cam Scatterbo, even, that could really take over as this like high volume power backs, kind of taking over the Nick Chubb role. So I actually really love taking the rebuild that direction, offensively at least.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, Austin, as far as running backs go. I know you've bounced a couple names off of me these last few weeks, but it's a loaded class. You've been gushing about it lately, and I've been digging into it myself as much as I can these last few days. And I mean, there's a lot of talent. I do think, to your point, you have to walk. I feel like the Browns are in a place where they have to walk away with one of them between the third and fourth round. They have two picks in the third. I think they have a high fourth, I would figure. So that's the range where I think they're really going to be able to pick at the skill position players that they kind of have any choice they want, as far as the running backs go. And it's going to be a very sweet range. And I also, another guy that Austin has spoken a lot about to me is Jack Beck from TCU. And, that's a guy that the more I thought about it, if I think he probably will end up going in that maybe late second at highest third round range.
Yeah.
He could be a guy, if they want to get back to their roots, that can fit that multiple tight end fit, bigger body.
Duke can block.
Don't kill me. But yes, exactly.
Duke can block. No.
So walking away with, a Scatabo or even a Devin Neal, Judkins, and then plus like a Jack Beck, and then you walk away with a couple offensive linemen in free agency and the draft. Like it could go a lot better than people are thinking it could if done the right way, which is the underlying factor.
Like they have solid depth too. That's kind of a bit going underrated. Guys like Zach Zinter that I feel like can at least be a pretty decent guard down the line. Guys like DeJuan Jones that have kind of just been like a plug and play wherever they need him, whenever they need him. Guys like that I feel like could be a solid piece going forward that can kind of mask and be a discount for you for the time being.
Yeah, and I was going to say, speaking to the whole Stefanski scheme, what quarterback fits the mold to do that? If we're not going quarterback, Anthony was mentioning going quarterback in the draft, but if they don't, the options are, let's say, interesting, to say the least. So what are you guys thinking? We'll start with you, Anthony, as far as the free agency class at quarterback. Who is the most ideal fit for Cleveland?
Yeah, I've kind of been exploring, my preferred options for what they do at quarterback if they don't end up drafting somebody, or I guess, they'll free agency will come first. So they'll decide what they want to do in free agency, and then the draft will come. And, I think they'll be telegraphing that pretty clearly. But, I think if they are going to go the route of maybe getting a bridge type guy in free agency, and then, drafting somebody in the second or third round, I like, I think Derek Carr is maybe my top choice of somebody who isn't going to cost a lot. Had, I think, kind of a quietly really good year for the Saints, in the ways that you would want from somebody who is going to be inheriting an offense that doesn't have a ton of weapons. He really for his whole career has been good at avoiding pressures, doesn't make a ton of mistakes, doesn't wow you, but is somebody who plays really well off of play action, which I think is a big key if the Browns go back to more of what they were doing in the Baker Mayfield era. And I think that's somebody who, I think the Saints could very well struggle to get. Let me say the Saints need to get rid of Derek Carr because they own like $30 million.
Yes.
And they really need to do everything they can to not pay him $30 million because I don't think he's a $30 million quarterback. But if the Browns could get him for, under 20, that would be a pretty decent get for them on a short-term basis where they could, maybe start him, get a look at somebody in the second or third round and decide if they need to go back to the quarterback in next year's draft in the first round. So I think that kind of keeps them, if in a scenario where they keep Myles Garrett and they need to stay competitive, which I think is probably more likely than not that they're going to want to try to roll this veteran laden team into something that's competitive next year. I think Carr is a pretty decent option. Obviously, like Aaron Rodgers, I guess if you think that he can keep the locker room together or whatever this issue is with him, maybe, I don't know. For me, I don't know if there's any price that I'd be okay having him in the building, but I think on the high end, I would say it sounds like the Rams are asking for a first round pick for Matthew Stafford. And then on top of that, you're gonna have to sign to a new contract. I think that's going to be cost prohibitive. for me at least. I would not be in love with doing that if it meant, giving up their, second round pick at 33 and then some change potentially to bring him in. I think that would be a lot if they have to pay him the market rate, which is going to be over $50 million. And that's just cash that the Browns, are going to struggle to account for with two guys like that on the roster. So there's a few other guys I think that could be interesting, but I think Carr is the one that catches my eye the most.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I like that a lot. Yeah, I was just like, I was listening to a Saints guy talk today about the likelihood of getting rid of Derek Carr, and it's from a Saints perspective, it seems more likely to happen than I thought, just because like it kind of has to happen. Like they don't have the money, and now they have to make things work. Like it's not something that they're able to do anymore. I'm with you. Like we've talked about Derek Carr. We think he's better than kind of what the general perception of Derek Carr is. That is kind of on the high end for me. I've heard Kirk Cousins thrown around a lot. Again, another insane contract for a old and injured quarterback. Not really sure how that would get divvied up. If a trade were to occur, I can't imagine they could take on really hardly any of that. But
well, I think Cousins is in a scenario where he goes to the Browns, he's likely to get cut by the Falcons. I think the Falcons owe him, he'll have like a guarantee that vests like for $10 million, I want to say. So the Falcons could save $10 million by getting rid of him. Now the price of a backup quarterback is like $4 to $6 million. So he would be a pricey backup, but the Falcons could keep him. Of course, if they get rid of him, they can manage that from a cap perspective, I think. So they could just cut him. And the Browns would pick him up probably for like the league minimum, like a Russell Wilson situation last year, where it's an offset contract, so they could sign him for the league minimum. That's like a really affordable option where he would be. It's hard to say whether the way he played last year, if he'd be somebody who's ready to start week one as you're kind of gearing up, ideally a draft pick that you've taken to maybe take the reins eventually. So yeah, I like the option of Cousins as somebody who, had success when Stefanski was the offensive coordinator with the Vikings.
Oh yeah.
Well, Kirk, Derek Carr, you guys are very rich for my taste. I was thinking,
I know
I'm sitting here like skimming the bottom of the barrel here, like trying to scrape off whatever I can, and I was thinking about who you could put behind an offensive line that probably won't be too good. And, I'm thinking of somebody that is familiar with the offense, that has been around. Jacoby Brissett. I'm a big Jacoby Brissett.
I saw that coming.
I knew you would. I wrote that down.
I love Jacoby Brissett. I think he's the best Browns quarterback they've had in the last since Baker. Let's put it that way. Since Baker.
I thought you were going to throw in Baker in that. Okay.
No. Other than Baker, he's been the best quarterback that they've had, and I think he could manage it. I think he'd be a good locker room professional. He'd be cheap. He's familiar. He's run the Stefanski offense before. So why not? And then if you really think he just is going to be the backup, take a Steelers approach. Justin Fields is probably going to be out there. Bring in Fields for cheap. You have two options. You might be competitive. You might be not. But at least you can say, hey, look, we're trying at least.
Yeah. I mean, Brissett would be good because he would get you like 2 guaranteed wins a year at least, because he beats the Bengals every single time they play. Patriots, Browns, it doesn't matter what team. It's ridiculous. So I would, if I'm them, to try and make the playoffs. Absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, I just think for Cleveland's sake, and I know I'm looking at it from the perspective of someone sitting at home that has job security, quote unquote, if I were in their position. I get they have to win on a year-to-year basis, and I'm not thinking about stuff like that. But I think trying to manage that position this year, it would be best to take the cheapest route while also, not going into it with a complete tank mask on, for lack of a better term. So
that's fair.
It's going to be interesting. The Browns are going to be fun to watch for these next few months. They're definitely going to be on my radar. But
me too.
If you guys have any closing thoughts, this will be the closing portion of the Browns. Anthony, this has been an awesome conversation. Once again, appreciate your time.
Yeah,
thanks,
absolutely.
Guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Great time.
So once again, if you want to follow Anthony on all of his socials, they'll be down in the description. You can go check him out. Highly recommend him a follow on Twitter. He is excellent. And the series he's starting with the salary cap for each team will make it very, very easy to understand. I promise you, I am the worst person when it comes to numbers and math and understanding that stuff. But it really, like, part of my prep for this just fortunately was benefited from you releasing that today. So thank you. But definitely check him out. All right, so we're back for the second part of episode 12. As we figured out during the break, this is the 12th episode. This is the rebuilding portion for the Carolina Panthers. Now, we're very excited to welcome Chris. He is actually an Eagles fan, but he wanted to talk about the Panthers because, let's be real. What are we going to say about the Eagles? There's not much conversation, and he is very interested in Carolina, and I'll let him kind of touch on that. But first, Chris, thank you for taking time to join us tonight. First off, we're excited to have you on.
Anything to talk about the Panthers, yeah. I was telling you guys that it seems like no one wants to talk about them, but it's just fun. They're a fun team. You got a young quarterback, young head coach. Just everything about them just exudes. I'm looking for a word here. I can't find it, but you guys know what I mean.
Yeah. Excitement.
Yeah,
Chris.
Yeah, I'm excited about this team.
Before we get into it, though, I do quickly want you to plug your socials, tell everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, I'm just C Cannon everywhere, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, wherever you take in content, that's where you'll find me under that username. That's about it.
It'll also be linked in the description, so you guys can just go down there and click through that. So, Carolina, another team that didn't finish with the best record, but unlike the Browns, who we started with, things are not nearly, I would say, as complicated comparatively, but there are still a lot of questions to answer. And considering that free agency is the first step of the offseason, we'll start with you, Austin. What do we think the Panthers need? Who are some veterans?
Anything that can rush the passer is kind of where I put my flag on. I've kind of been looking more towards draft picks for them as their first round pick, but they have some other needs. They are definitely in need of, I think, another receiver. Bryce Young's kind of always existed with speedier kind of separators underneath, and I don't think they've quite had that. I think they definitely need some interior D-line depth, and I think that they badly need another nickel presence. You got guys like Mike Hilton that might become free agents this season, so I'd love to kind of see another veteran presence on that defense. So Mike Hilton's probably like my guy I'm rooting for in the nickel there.
Yeah, I agree with all the needs. I would prefer they attack corner in the draft. I really want to see someone next to J.C. Horn and then go after someone to get next to Derek Brown and solidify the run game, which, let's be honest, it was the point they fell off last year. If they could stop the run in a lot of their games, the Bengals game specifically, they would have won that game. But a lot of games down the stretch, they fell apart because of the run game. And that's an area where I think you can go after a guy like Milton Williams, a guy like Harmon in the draft, and just solidify that. But yeah, outside of that, I'm going to disagree. I agree about the underneath with I would love Tez Johnson, realistically, just to throw in the slot with Leggett and Coker. I think obviously Coker, you see him as sort of a Nico Collins. That's what a lot of people see him as. But I mean, can he get that high? Who knows? He had high points last year. But yeah, I like Tez Johnson as someone in like third, early fourth, maybe if he falls that far, to really solidify that slot position.
It's definitely like, I mean, free agency will tell the story for them going to the draft, of course. And you can say that for a lot of teams. Yeah. Although for the Panthers offense, speaking about what Bryce Young is going to need, they leaned into the run game last year. Dave Canales stayed committed. Chuba Hubbard earned his workload, earned his extension, and he was really the biggest. He was the crutch for that offense. So that backfield got interesting when they drafted Jonathan Brooks, and it got even more interesting when Jonathan Brooks returned And then it got even more interesting when Jonathan Brooks re-injured his knee. So now that they've extended Hubbard and they are clearly going to remain committed to the run, what do they do about the backfield? Is Hubbard going to remain their guy? Do they keep Brooks around, hoping he makes a return? What happens with the Panthers' backfield? Because I think this is the most important part of this offense based on what we saw from last year.
I've been a huge fan of Chuba Hubbard. I was a huge fan of him before the season last year. I didn't, like you said, the pick came out of nowhere. I didn't really get it, although because Jonathan Brooks coming off of ACL, you're going to have to wait for him anyway. And then I could be wrong, but they extended Chuba after the Jonathan Brooks re-tear, right? I think I could be wrong because it was within like a 2-week span. I'm pretty sure.
It was almost at the same time, yeah.
Because you'd have to assume if they did like do it afterwards, they had to take into account that Brooks may not be ready because it came within last week. He's not going to. And I really think Chuba can be a workhorse for the next 4 years, and I see them doing that. Even if Jonathan Brooks comes back and is their guy, I think they can split a 50-50 backfield with Canales and how much he likes to establish the run. Like you said, you're going to need guys that can take on a workload, and splitting that between two guys is just going to allow them to be more efficient and effective throughout the game.
Yeah, Austin, as far as Brooks goes, would you personally, from Carolina's standpoint, take that risk, or are you looking for other options?
I mean, from where they drafted him, like putting that amount of capital into a running back and then just kind of letting him walk away is kind of hard to do. Obviously, he just re-injured himself in almost the exact same fashion and time of year. So I think his comeback might not even happen this season. So I think at least for this season, backup running backs are pretty easy to replace. I think that they can find a guy to kind of take some of the load off of Chuba Hubbard for the time being. But I am really excited for when Jonathan Brooks can come back. I think he's still a fantastic running back. He was a really good prospect and normally would have been worth that selection if he didn't have a pre-existing ACL tear. So, I do like Brooks in their offense. I think that he fits everything that Canales has ever tried to implement. So I would just try and find a replacement for this season only, and then try and bring Brooks back.
So back to the point of the other weapons around Bryce Young, you guys touched on who you feel like the archetype of receiver that probably helps this offense the most. I was a big Xavier Legette guy. I know Austin has been outspoken against him. You know, it makes me a little mad because I've been wrong so far. But I do think this is a team, in my opinion, as far as free agency goes, could use is like the Adam Thielen experiment. It's been such a value move for them, for lack of a better phrase. It's worked out. Let's put it that way. And I think a lot of the passing attack has run through him a lot more than I think they ever expected. So if he falls off, if I don't think he's a free agent, if I remember correctly. So someone's going to have to kind of step into that role. I'm feeling like a veteran in free agency is going to be in the cards for Carolina. But that's not to say that a guy like Tyus Johnson couldn't come in the third round or the fourth round and be an option for Bryce. But let's move on to the draft specifically. So Carolina is a team that is selecting, 108
and 7?
I believe it's 8.
Yeah.
108. So is this a team that's trading back? Are they staying put? Is it going to depend on their options? Austin, what are you feeling?
It depends on their options. It depends on if they are able to fix their pass rush. It depends if they are able to get a guy kind of like a Milton Williams to kind of come next to Derek Brown. It totally kind of depends on what they are able to do in free agency. I think they'll probably be able to get actually a lot done. I think a lot of their free agents that they have on their team are set to walk away. I wouldn't bring back too many of them. So they're set to spend some money. And I think that their draft will kind of be open to interpretation. I think they could trade back, especially if they're kind of wanting to go towards receiver or corner. And a guy like Bill Johnson's gone, I would trade back towards like the middle end of the first round. You can get really premium corners in that range, it seems. So I love where they're at. I still think that they could get a value edge rusher like a James Pierce or a Mike Green, if you're into Mike Green, in that range, and still change their defense for the better, like by a lot.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly how I feel, because I really don't think this is a draft that they can mess up. I don't think there's a lot of ways they can mess this up. If Will Johnson's there at 8, you take him and run with him and JC and just let them cook. But if you don't have a premier talent at 8, I think you trade down to somewhere either early 20s, late teens, see what you can get, and then you get that value there, and then still bring in a pick late second, early third, so somewhere around there, and you run with it, because this is a team that their holes they're not few and far between, but they have talent. The whole thing is they just need players that can fill in these gaps, and players for the future, like a tackle once Moton's gone, or a slot receiver in one of the day 2 picks. I just don't see a lot of ways they can mess this draft up. They're set up very well, especially if they have a good free agency.
Yeah, they are. I think the big question for me, defensively speaking, at least, is what happens. Well, not what happens. I mean, Ejiro Evero, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. I feel like I'm struggling with names right now, but he was a very he was a premium hire, I would say, at the time of when they brought him in. He was very well respected coming from Denver, and they managed to snag him. The Panthers didn't have the best year to date defensively. They weren't great. If Ejiro Evero is still around, are they going to be, defensively speaking, looking up like they would have been, or like we thought they were when they did hire him originally?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I just don't think they had the horses to be able to do it. I think like any time that Nick Scott is getting like meaningful snaps on your defense, it's not going to be good. I mean, even then, like Xavier Woods had 100% snaps, like 100% snap share. That's insane. And Xavier Woods was up and down. Like people like Mike Jackson got a ton of playing time. Like they were just guys that they were going to struggle from the guys that they put on the field, regardless of who was calling plays on defense.
Yeah, I think he was doing a lot with what he was given. There's just not much you can do when you go all in to help your quarterback, and it works. That's a good thing. But you're kind of it's kind of what the Bengals are going through. You see a defense coordinator lose their job when they're doing God's work over there, and the only place you can go downhill that's the only place you can go is downhill in Cincinnati. But you keep him in Carolina. I think it's great, and then you just give him weapons. You give him things to work with that aren't Xavier Woods, for instance, like you said. And I think you turn it around. I think he can do it. I don't think there's any reason to hit the panic button with him.
Yeah, I would agree. I think after this past season, we've seen. I think there are other guys around the league that you could certainly point to and wonder how they lost their job, like a guy like Lou Anarumo, who is, like you referred to, in a similar position. And I think Austin and I have kind of agreed over the last few weeks talking about it. Kind of got screwed. I mean, he was the Mahomes buster for a short time there. Like, it felt like he was the only guy that had the answer to him for a little bit. And all of a sudden, he's in Indy now.
I love that.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. I know the Colts were another team you mentioned. Yeah. I do want to talk more about Bryce Young. They did just re-sign Andy Dalton, too. I think I feel like a no-brainer for the way that relationship seems to have benefited Bryce Young, and how Andy Dalton just stepping in whenever he's called on. Super beneficial for that team. And it makes you wonder, Bryce Young, is this going to continue with what we saw toward the back half of the year? Because he did pick it up coming off of his break, if you will. It's like him and his girlfriend kind of took like a short break, and then they got back together, and things are better now. But does that really mean that things are going to remain better for the long term, or is it just like the re-honeymoon phase because we're back together and we're back in love? But will that change? Austin, we'll start with you.
I don't see why it couldn't sustain. we saw very few glimpses of it his rookie year. We saw like the Packers game his rookie year, where like the one or few times that his team can actually like play to NFL level around him, he plays at an NFL level. And last year we saw his offensive line start to mesh a little bit better. We saw guys like Leggett still was able to make plays. David Moore was making plays. Like they actually had guys that were making plays. And we saw Bryce be actually like a good above average quarterback. So I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be able to sustain it as long as they don't butcher this offseason. Which like with like what you were saying, like there's no way they do. Like they're just in such a good situation where like there's no way they butcher this. So like I don't see any way that it's not sustainable.
If we didn't have the glimpses from Bryce's rookie year, I would say there's a possibility. But I just think that him and Canales and the way Canales worked him back, I think it's a system that's going to continue to work. And then, like you said, the talent around him, I think they've sustained him with guys that he can work with. Even Jatavion Sanders towards the end of the year last year got hurt. But when he was healthy, I like the way they were using him. As for, I lost my train of thought. I'm trying. I completely lost where I was going.
Jatavion Sanders. Hopefully that helps.
I completely forgot. Oh, I was gonna say, yeah. And if he wasn't making plays on his own, like you watched the Eagles game backed up in his own 10, I think, gets pressured, steps up in the pocket, lofts a ball over 2 defenders downfield, right in the pocket. Those are things that shows that it's him. He's not a product of anything. It's him going out and making a play for his team in the biggest stage. And then even the throw to Leggett down the stretch of that game that would have won it, absolute dot. Leggett should have came up with it. Let's be honest. But yeah, things like that makes you have confidence in him going forward that he can continue to do these things, and he will most likely.
The more that I think about it, Jatavion Sanders was promising. Tommy Tremble is Tommy Tremble. But knowing how stacked this tight end class is, I feel like a premium tight end for Bryce Young in this offense could kind of tip things over for him in the right direction. Like, I think receiver, of course, would help. Beefing up the offensive line continues to help. But it feels like there are a few teams in the NFL where a tight end really feels like it's needed. It feels like it would fit the scheme. And it feels like in this class, it would make the most sense. And I think the Panthers specifically should be on the board of tight ends, going into this class. So who are the top guys for you, Austin, going into the 2025 draft?
For Carolina specifically, I kind of still like to stay along the lines of I like to get them an inline tight end. I love Jatavion Sanders. But he's kind of this thin-built athlete who almost plays like a really big receiver. And he actually showed a lot of really good glimpses last season. But for them, you see guys like Gunnar Helm who are kind of more like 6'5", 250 builds, like great hands, great red zone style. Not the best athlete, but you can kind of pair that with like the people like Sanders that you already do have. And it can make a good tight end room where you can run 12 personnel and have like different looks. Elijah Arroyo is one that does kind of play like Sanders, who's like an absolute freak athlete. We've talked about him where he's a great route runner, weirdly good athlete with actually pretty good size. So depends if you want to kind of go for like your style of tight end or try to mix it up. But I do like Gunnar Helm for them, kind of like in like the mid rounds.
Yeah, well, like I wouldn't like a tight end for them in the early rounds, but if you can go out and obviously Arroyo does he is more of the athlete, but he also could fill that slot role that we were talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. The big slot guy like the Kelsey, something obviously not to that level, but one of those guys that can go out there and be a bigger body against a slot and just be a matchup nightmare for Bryce on these in-breaking routes. I don't know if I necessarily make it a high priority, but I do think getting it, he does need a threat, whether that is Jatavion Sanders. He needs a big body threat. As a little guy, he just needs that. You have to have a big guy to be able to hit over the middle of the field.
Yeah, that's kind of where my train of thought was. It felt like Adam Thielen. It's like anytime he was in trouble, where the fuck is Adam? And that has to be done at some point. Like this has to end.
I also do like Coker though. I think he might be able to do that. He's a pretty big body, but it'll be interesting what they try to do with him. Like whether they keep him inside or whether they let him try to break out on the outside. It'll just be interesting how he works out in the end.
Was it? I feel like I remember a short time where like Jalen Coker was finally getting reps, and then like David Moore came back from injury or something, and everyone was like pissed at David Moore. Like, why is this guy still taking reps from this kid?
Yeah, before Coker got hurt, he started playing really good, and then he came back and even had the long touchdown. I forget again who it was against. It was like a 70-yarder against. It might have been KC. I forget though. I could be wrong.
I do remember that.
Sounds right. Yeah, but that's like what he was in college. Like at Holy Cross, he was this like outside perimeter guy. His entire college film was just him going deep and winning.
Yeah.
So like I don't see why a undrafted guy from Holy Cross can come in and win in the inside while he can't do what he was doing in college. So yeah, I'm into that.
I'm really excited to see where he goes. Or what he continues to do, I should say.
Oh yeah.
So as far as bouncing back to the defensive side of the ball, we have bounced around the idea of like a Milton Williams joining Derek Brown on the inside. It's been, referred to that Jadeveon Clowney's probably returning. And going back to what they might do in the draft at 108, if Will Johnson's gone prior, if the real premium skill position guys go, I'm kind of thinking they do have a pretty good pool of edge rushers to choose from. So who on your board, Austin, would you say is if a mock draft panned out in your mind, where would you go?
So theirs entirely depends on like what archetype of edge rusher they're able to get in free agency, because the range of them is humongous. You have guys like James Pierce and Mike Green that are probably about like 245, like slick pass rushers, but kind of struggle against run defense. You have guys like Myles Williams from Georgia, who's like an absolute freak, elite run defender, but is probably going to need like 2 to 3 years to develop his pass rush to be par level. So depends what they need. I really like a pass rusher for them, and then filling in run defenders in free agency. I think that's a little bit easier to find. But I don't think you can go wrong with James Pierce, Mike Green, Myles Williams from Georgia. There's a few more if they wanted to reach, like Jalen Walker from Georgia, not quite as high, but like I could totally see them having 4 or 5 guys that they're all the way in on.
Yeah, Myles Williams, if he somehow got there, I'd really like that. But yeah, like when you talk about edges, I think it all just depends on what they do in free agency. Like you were saying, Jadeveon, he's getting up there. You can't take the amount of snaps he's had before. You're gonna have to get a plethora. I think it's gonna have to go deeper than that. So I like a guy like I really like. I'm drawing a blank here because David Walker. I just started watching him the other day, but I saw a Brandon Graham comp on Twitter. I honestly really like. I didn't see it before, but then you see them side by side, and honestly, the bull rush looks damn near identical. He's a guy I really like in the later rounds, or I say later rounds, day 2. But yeah, I think there's so much potential they can get in the middle rounds that's really where I've fallen in love with the talent for them. But I'd still love the Will Johnson, the Myles Williams, the James Pierce potential, like just the home run hit at the front rounds. But yeah, I think there's so much you can do.
Yeah, it sounds like you are big. If you were the GM come draft day, you would be, from what it sounds like, trading back if you could, or exploring.
If Will Johnson's not there, I feel like I'm all in on trading back, unless like I said, one of the premier rushers drop, or if Mason Graham somehow ends up down there, which there's no chance that's happening.
No.
But if God forbid he pulls a Larry Tunsil, ends up there, by all means, by all means, hit a home run. Mason Graham's a pick. So basically, Will Johnson's my guy.
Will Johnson's had like a weird, like undeserved falling. It's felt like over the past 2 or 3 weeks, where like people, they're looking too hard at the film. Like I don't think that they're trying to like him, because if you do try to like him at all, like you see the Pat Surtain comps that people have been giving out, and it's warranted. Like he has every single tool that you could ask for from a perimeter corner, especially across from J.C. Horn, where like you can almost make J.C. Horn your 2. Like that's insane. Like he is a fantastic corner, which Like any team in the top from 5 to 10 should be drafting Will Johnson.
Yeah, like 6'2", 205. Like I don't know what there is not to like about him. I talked about it. Saw a few people questioning his heart because he sat out with the turf toe. Don't really understand that. I mean,
they've never had turf toe then because it hurts.
There's no reason to rush him back. The Michigan team this year, they were bad. The offense was frankly terrible. And when Will Johnson was on the field, he was shutting down his entire half for the majority of games. And whenever there was a mistake, it was either over the top to the middle of the field or to the opposite side. And it's just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense how he's falling. I don't get it, but I still think he'll be picked in the top 10. And if he falls outside that, then I don't know what's going on.
That's fair.
Speaking of guys falling, I feel like there's been a smear campaign slowly brewing over on James Pierce's name.
Yeah,
recently I saw a couple reports come out saying he's not the best character. I saw someone on Twitter claim that he was a high school classmate with him, and he said the dude was an absolute crash out. So this is like, I was not privy to this until I started seeing all this, but James Pierce is another guy that, speaking of fallers, could end up having that tumble like we saw like a Laramie Tunsil have, and even like a Jalen Carter to some effect. You know, that fall was enough for the Eagles to end up with him. So God forbid like that happens all over, where all of a sudden James Pierce, I mean, falling to 32 would be catastrophic. Like it would have to come out that he like killed someone, I think. But still, speaking of guys that are falling, James Pierce is a name that I was reading recently, and I'm like, there's no like solid evidence to this, but you have to wonder, like, who would just start saying this shit about somebody? It feels so baseless, but
somebody drafting it like 17, like the Bengals, who wants a pass rusher this season. Like, oh, he's a horrible human being. Yeah, don't even draft him. Yeah, like he hit me in a parking lot and didn't stop. Like, that's the kind of stuff you do if you want a smoke screen.
Yeah, the biggest like reply that was like, okay, that was a Seahawks fan, obviously. After Jalen Carter, I don't care. Like after what happened passing on Jalen Carter, he was kind of just I do not care.
It can't be worse than that. Like him just being a high school crash out. Like, yeah, okay, shocker. Edge rusher isn't a great person. Okay, like that's not a headline.
Unless he's crashing out on your sideline, then it's okay. Maybe, but still, he's premier
in high school. Yeah, if it's a high school worry, I'm not that worried.
Yeah, he said something to the effect of he had like severe anger issues, and the like, and it was.
So did Lawrence Taylor. Okay, like congrats,
exactly.
Awesome.
And Lawrence had other things going on too outside.
Yeah, way worse.
Yeah, I feel like Lawrence Taylor was like a good comp to like a certain extent, because then after that,
he was drinking Listerine and doing coke. You know, like he had a lot worse stuff going on. So
that kind of was normalized back then to some capacity. Like that was like in that era, Lawrence Taylor.
Yeah, we can't go into that because that gets into the whole Jerry Jones thing being normalized.
Well,
we can't be doing that.
There's a lot of Lawrence Taylor stories out there.
Oh yeah.
We talked about the Jerry Jones picture a few episodes
at a
ago.
Rally.
Jerry Jones was at that rally, and people it just like kind of came and went. And no one even talks about it.
Yeah, speaking of the Panthers, Jerry Jones is a racist. Yeah.
Really. Having that picture though that's insane, man. having that on your record, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I would have denied that forever. That wasn't me. He just has blue eyes. That's not me at all.
You gotta have the LeBron black SUVs pull up at that point. You gotta get rid of all evidence. That's kind of, I don't know how you end up there to begin with is insane.
No,
the LeBron black SUVs. That's good. I mean, my thoughts on the Panthers kind of, I'm not going to say stop there, but I feel like we have touched most bases when it comes to Carolina. I mean, we touched on the receiver room, the running back situation, Bryce Young's outlook, the offensive line, the interior, the secondary. I feel like we've gotten pretty much as far as we could with the most important sides of the ball, but there was a conversation prior to the pod starting that I feel like is worthy of mentioning. Austin started his own smear campaign on poor Eddie Pinheiro, and Chris Jordan started to join in. Like, is Eddie really not good? Like,
it was brought to my attention one time because like this was like as he was setting records for like being the most efficient kicker ever. And I said something about it one time, and Panthers fans came after me. They were like, "No, you don't understand. He's actually bad." And I was like, "Why?" And they were like, "He has only one kick over 50 yards this season." And I was like, "No way." Yeah. And then I looked; he's 1 of 2 from 50+ yards in 2024. And even after that, I made that post, he started actually missing everything. So, if you're not going to be like a 95% kicker from like 45 and in, you need to be able to make a kick past 50, and he cannot do that. So, I don't see why we're bringing him back. He's also a free agent, so like he cannot come back.
See, my beef with Eddie Pinheiro it goes back to his Florida days. I'm a Florida fan. He's accurate. Like, this man does not like, but when you put him beyond, he cannot kick the ball. Like, he cannot kick the ball far. He's just he just
like,
can't.
That has to happen. You need to be able to.
It's crazy. He's at, like, his last year at Florida, 94%. But then you put him beyond a certain. He went 17 for 18 in college. That's really good. But then you put him beyond a certain distance, and it's just that man's not making it there.
Poor Eddie.
No.
Man. Eddie, like, I feel like
good
Eddie
guy, probably.
Like,
good.
But that's the thing. Like, he seems like a very composed, chill kind of guy, and it's just like, yeah, Eddie Pinheiro fucking blows. I'm like,
hey, it's all business, you know. I can't in good faith say yes, Panthers fans. I know, like, you have playoffs on the horizon here soon. We're gonna send you back this kicker that can't make 50-yard field goals. Like, good luck winning a game. Like we saw the Bengals make the playoffs because their kicker only made 50-yard field goals for like 4 straight games. Like, I can't imagine if Eddie Pinheiro was like in a place like that. Like, Bryce Young's game-winning drives are going to have to be like 15 yards farther than everyone else's because he can't make it that far. So
that's a fair point. Like, on a serious note, kickers have, I feel like these last couple of years have made more of an impact on the game than it feels like ever. I don't know if that can be statistically supported, but it helps to have a guy that can get you 3 points from almost 50 yards and in. I mean, it's the days of like the Nick Folks are kind of over, and it feels like that's kind of what like the 45 and in kind of kickers. Like, it feels like that you can't be that anymore and be successful. So I feel like kickers is a kicker specifically is another position where you kind of got to treat it like every other position on the field, where you want to have the guy that has the most upside, the guy that, you know, he might not make, 92% of kicks, but he can still give you that opportunity to tie the game if you can't convert on 3rd and 7 on the final drive, and then he can boot the 57-yarder with confidence. Like, that stuff matters. And if Eddie can't do it, and Bryce Young is relying on it to save his legacy, then it is fair observation.
Like, a quarterback should be able to get somewhere near like a little bit past the 40-yard line and feel comfortable like they've put their team in a good position to win the game. They shouldn't have to get to like the 30 in order for this to be like an appropriate game-winning drive from the offense. So, yeah.
The only thing is how much can you, valuing the position, really impact getting a good kicker? Because you see the best kicker in the league, they're going to have Brandon Aubrey. He was looking for CS jobs like before he came in.
I have no idea how to find them. No idea.
Yeah, you and me both.
I guess that's kind of no. Go ahead.
But yeah, like you look at and then you look at highly drafted kickers like I'm drawing a blank. The kid from FSU like 6 years ago.
Like Agayo, like Roberto.
Yeah,
Agayo.
Yeah. He knocks everything through his entire college career, and then comes to the NFL, and he's just a head case. It's just things like that. Like you just got to get lucky. You just got to get lucky and find a kick, like a great kicker most of the times.
I have scouted one this entire season. I have one kicker under my belt just so I can throw him in conversation. Nick Fitzgerald, that's going to be my guy. That's the Panthers' next kicker. Remember that name. That's going to be it. Also, Florida State. Not to jinx them.
I think, like, as much as it's luck, I just really feel like I'm starting to like realize I have a passion for this conversation. It's not just luck. Like, teams will settle with guys that just consistently fucking miss, and they don't give it. Like the Bills with Tyler Bass, like I get it. He straightened up toward the end of the season. He did get better, so I'll give him credit. But there was a short time where it felt like you rolled him out there, and you're like, he's missing this. Like against Kansas City 2 years ago in the playoffs, like I didn't even watch the kick because I knew he wasn't making it. I'm like, he's not making this. I said it before he kicked it, and he fucking sailed it. And he continued to roll into practice without any sort of competition. So I do understand that it might be tough to come across guys that are going to be those home run hitters, but I feel like there's like a plague in the NFL of just settling with who you have out of fear of having somebody that will be worse, which I get, but you don't treat every position in football like that. And I feel like kicker out of every position on the team is one of the most important. So why is it any different?
Feels like the leash for kickers, like league wide, is like so volatile between teams. Like you either have way too short of a leash, or you have a guy you're rolling out there like Scott Sterling on his last leg, just missing every kick, and it's just, dude, like, can we like bring in someone to compete with him or anything? Or you have a kicker that misses 3 kicks in like 2 weeks, and it's like, okay, the sky's falling, get him out of here. It's just there's no in between.
Yeah, it's always Joey Sly. I feel like Joey Sly has been a kicker on every single team the past like 10 seasons.
That is the first guy every team calls when they need a kicker. Every time.
Yeah. He's bad from 30 and he's good from 65. He's my favorite kicker in the league. He's a beast.
But I guess that's kind of my point. I think I would rather take a risk with a kicker like that than have a... I mean, do I feel that way? Like Joey Sly or Eddie Pinheiro.
This is like a Mo Alley Cox, Austin Hooper thing. I don't know. Probably Joey Sly. Like, I don't know.
Right. Like, I would rather have the chance to make the deep kick with the slight chance that he misses the short one than have next to no chance.
Cam York. Let's throw Cam York into the discussion.
Cam York belongs nowhere near this conversation. He missed a 30-yarder to almost lose the Broncos game. That guy. Dude, he was supposed to be good too. So yeah, this makes zero sense.
Exactly. It's just
how to scout a kicker.
You just throwing shit at the wall and see him what hits.
Yeah. The most accurate like SEC kicker that season gets like a 5th round pick every single year.
Like Evan McPherson.
Yeah, he's been fine. Like he was good for a while. Like,
yeah, but he was dominating his first few years in the league. He wasn't missing a thing, and then like last year or the year before, I think he started to. He missed a lot down the stretch. Could be wrong, but yeah, you have people coming after him, and then this year he's doing fine again. I think I could be wrong. I'm not a kicker guy, obviously.
I became one today. This entire week I've been ranking long snappers, so I've done a lot more into the special teams unit than I ever thought I would. So I've been very much on my kicker stuff this week. Oh, that's horrible.
They're people too. Yeah, they're people too.
Long snappers are people too. They deserve a stat. They don't have one. I've been trying to find one forever.
They don't have a stat. They have to have a stat.
There's no stat. They don't even have PFF grades. Nothing.
They should have snap per attempt. I don't know.
I think there is a stat. I think it's like the velocity behind the snap, like how fast the ball gets to like the holder's hands. Like I'm not kidding. Like I've watched like because I was telling you guys before the pod, I was a kicker in high school for 2 years, so I was invested in this a little bit, and they do have like these camps, and it's not just kicker camps. It's also long snapper camps, and it's also holder camps. Like
that's how we got Cameron Cheeseman, a draft pick. They're all scams.
That's why I was laughing because I forgot like they do. I don't think they do it at the combine, but yeah, they speed time the ball coming out.
Yeah, that's so insane. They got Cameron Cheeseman drafted.
I'll tell you what, it's impressive. Like you ever seen them do the overhead throws with when they're warming up, the long snappers? Yes, that's crazy. I don't know how they do that. It
makes zero sense to me.
Yeah, because they're slinging it. They're out there slinging it with 2 hands. Whoa.
Hey.
Pause.
You caught yourself. I didn't even.
You know who was bad this year? Dustin fucking Hopkins. Talk about a team that gave that guy an infinite leash. He went 18 for 27 on kicks this year. He had a 66.7% field goal percentage.
Like, supposed to be a Panthers talk.
That is criminal. That is criminal, though. Like, Dustin Hopkins would go out there and routinely miss a 35 to 45 yarder, and they would just continue to employ him. Like, this is what I was talking about. Like, the complacency with this position. It is like arguably the most impactful position outside of quarterback for a football team.
That's fair.
That's my rant.
Big kicker guy here. Yeah,
that's my rant. I told you. I realized
no bias.
I'm growing a passion for this as we were having
no bias. You former kicker. They're people too.
They are.
Yeah, I mean, I also had like a whole period of time where I ranked punters, and that was like my biggest post of all time by far. Was when I ranked all 32 punters, and I put it to Japanese city pop from the 70s, and that was it. Like that was what I did. So I'm gonna do that again with long snappers. So like I've been in a hole the past week on special teams. I need a break. I need to look at running backs again.
I think it's a bad team and they got a bad kicker. It's kind of, they don't care because you miss a kick, you're kind of helping them in that point. Like Dustin Hopkins, you're on the Browns. Like, hey man, just go out there, miss this, get us a higher pick.
He's like, the only reason why they're like in position to get a quarterback. Yeah, like it would be the Raiders if not for them. So
what do you go this year? I'm trying to find it.
Hopkins.
Oh God, oh my goodness.
He was awful. I'm telling
18
you.
18 for 27.
Yes, he was 18 for 27.
God.
Every time.
How many of that was like under 50? Like, was it like 30 yarders he was missing?
He attempted. Oh wait, hold on. He attempted 8 50-yarders, and he was 50% from 50 plus. 50%. He was 5 for 8 from 40 for 49. Like he wasn't even good in that range either.
This is incredible. This is the special teams podcast now. This is what we're gonna do from now on. Only special teams.
Well, I guess with that being said, the Panthers do deserve one more nod. Is there any wrap up comment? Any final thoughts you guys have on Carolina?
Dave Canales. The one thing coming into this year that he probably was his weakness was maybe falling too much in love with the run game. You saw it in Tampa, and that's mainly why their run game was extremely inefficient the year he took over as OC there. But then you come into Carolina, the first couple weeks, sure, you ran the ball too much. But then once you got later and later into the season, you would start to see that balance with Bryce Young starting to operate within himself and starting to really become one within the offense. And I think he did a great job of making it more of a 50-50 offense down the stretch. And I hope to see that going forward.
Yeah, I think Dave Canales actually deserves a ton of credit. Like, I'm not going to go as far as to say coach of the year because that would be ridiculous. But in a couple of years, like, I think he very easily will be in that conversation, assuming that this trajectory continues upward, because he inherited a not great situation. He didn't have like his pick of the litter for options when it came to coaching opportunities like Ben Johnson did. Like Ben Johnson just was telling teams left and right, no, I don't want to coach for you. Like he didn't have that. And he goes into Carolina, one of, if not the worst situation at that time. And with a quarterback that people had a lot of doubts about, especially after he started to suck, and he's making it work. So give it a year or two. Like this might be my early proclamation of potential Dave Canales coach of the year consideration. Give it 2 or 3 years. I'm going to say it right now. I might be behind that.
I'll write that down. I'll remember that.
Okay. Hey man,
I'm with it.
I wouldn't mind even saying that earlier. I wouldn't mind that. I
like 1 year. We're talking 1 year.
You heard it here. Next season.
Amen. I had the Panthers 7-9 last year. I legitimately, I don't. I think the Bucs might have a hard time this year without Cohen replacing him, because I didn't. Cohen was kind of a 50-50 flop coming from Kentucky anyway. He hit. I don't know if they're gonna be able to do that again. I still think the NFC South is up for. I think it's up. I think whoever wants it can go out there and get it. And right now, I feel like they're the most complete team. Because Atlanta, no. Wait. Let me finish. No, in terms of, okay. Because Raheem, I loved him coming in, but the way he operated that team last year, just there was zero confidence. Yeah. I have no confidence in them. I'm almost completely out on Raheem. No matter what goes on in Atlanta, I'm not very confident in them. And then you have New Orleans, Kellen Moore. I mean, I'm a fan of Kellen, but how much can you really do with Derek Carr? And I don't know how far they might be bigger competition because, like I said, Tampa with Baker next year by himself, I don't know what that's going to look like, especially if they lose Chris Godwin. I don't know what Tampa is going to look like without Cohen and Godwin. That'll be an interesting thing to watch. So I think they have a shot. Will they? I don't know. But if they do somehow win this division, then I think he can definitely be in the running for it.
Yeah, I mean, if the Panthers make the playoffs next season without having the most dramatic roster rebuild of all time, I will easily pencil. I will make sure that I get a vote, and I will vote him in.
That's probably easily my hottest take is surrounding the Panthers being a borderline playoff team the last 2 years, or not 2 years ago, obviously, but this year and the upcoming year.
Hey,
damn.
I respect it.
All right, I'm in.
Because you look how close they were to winning. Like they would just flip flop some games, and I mean you're looking at a borderline. You're looking at an 8-win team in the NFC South. That's competing for a playoff spot.
Yeah, he's just far too handsome of a coach to not work. All the handsome coaches just work out. Like all the ugly ones, like the Adam Gases of the world, they don't work out. Like this has to happen.
I saw
according to the last 10 years of the NFL.
I think Anthony said something about that the other day. Something about who was it? I think it was Variable. If Variable doesn't work out in New England or something, so it's something about it's gonna be bad for the good-looking head coaches thing. I don't know. Something about aura. It's gonna be bad for aura.
No, it kind of is like the aura coaches of the world are kind of dying off. Like Dan Campbell and Nick Sirianni joining the conversation, regrettably.
Mike Tomlin's in that conversation. Yeah, Mike Tomlin's has like a negative connotation to his name these days. So
Mike McDaniel's on the hot seat. We're just getting cooked left and right. We're getting cooked left and right.
Oh man! All right. Well, I think those were all our thoughts for the Carolina Panthers. Good-looking coaches, kickers. Smear campaigns. We touched a lot of corners of the world in football on this portion of the episode, but I hope you guys enjoyed for sure. Be sure to check out Chris down in the description. All of his socials will be linked down there where you can find him. Be sure you're following and subscribing and liking and sharing all of his stuff. Be sure you're checking out Against the Blitz socials. All of that is down in the description as well. You can find both Austin and I, our socials down there too. Just go down there, just scroll. Anyway, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in episode 13.
13, I think.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, thanks for being on.
Yes, no problem. Do the thing.